Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. So first of all, Bill, superficially, investment in real estate seems like a simple business of two numbers. You have rents and cap rates. But then we do know that fortunes are regularly lost and made in real estate. Why do you think that is?
Because the key word is superficial. I don't think it is a superficial business. I don't think it's rocket science, but it's about doing many tasks, none individually complicated well. But to answer your question, fortunes are won and lost, period, in a lot of industries. And they're won and lost in financial service-related industries, and real estate is indirectly a financial service because people forget there's a business cycle. And they're greedy when they should be fearful, and they're fearful when they should be greedy. So I think it's the animal spirits which causes people not to stop when markets get overheated. They're one more deal, one more deal. What compounds it in real estate, and this is the important point, is that until recently it was a highly leveraged asset class. 3-to-1, 4-to-1. Banks had excess balance sheet capacity because all the good corporate borrowers went to the bond market, and they lent, and it was a low barrier to entry business for second generation immigrants, people. You didn't need a university education. So I think that the leverage in the system amplifies the cycles, but I don't think it's superficial. And it's cap rate and the yield, the rents and the yields. I mean, you need to unpack each of those numbers. Which are they heading directionally? Where are interest rates going? Where are tax rates going? So
it's the importance of the analysis that matters.
Yes, you can overthink it, but you can underthink it.
Yeah.
There's no one Europe. There really isn't a crisis in Germany, except how much they're going to have to subsidize the countries that actually have the crisis. I mean, in the 90s, Germany was described as the sick man of Europe. It has extremely low unemployment, and it exports more than nearly every country in absolute terms, despite India, the US, Brazil, China all having populations much greater. I think the UK is in an austere time, but I don't think that the foundations are in crisis, and the Nordic countries are thriving. I think that the crisis is in the peripheral economies where this cycle has amplified their weak spots. So in general, they had social democratic aspirations in their spending, but they didn't have the economic growth generators to afford that. Italy, a lovely place to visit. If there are Italians here, I mean no disrespect, but a very challenging economy. Spain got wildly imbalanced in construction, in housing construction. Ireland guaranteed a banking system which was integral multiples of its GDP. So each of these countries had multiple Achilles heels, which the recession and the banking crisis amplified. And there's a currency problem because really the Deutschmark went in cheap and everything else went in dear, and Germany has benefited. So there are problems, but the countries will have to tighten their belts and get their way out of them. I'm fundraising, and I tell investors Europe consists of 750 million people with 48 countries, and its needs are not going to disappear, but it has to, it has to take the medicine of austerity for a while, I think, before sunny skies reappear. I don't know if the gentleman from Frank Warwick was there, but we had the opportunity with F&C to buy a fantastic shopping center in Dublin at a 9% yield, anchored by Marks & Spencer's, Boots, View Cinemas, at a 9% yield. But we sat around and we said, okay, if we're going to pay 300 million euros for it, we need to sell it for 360 to 370. Who's going to write that size of check? These markets are small. Portugal is small. Ireland is small. It's okay for a private investor.
Yeah.
But I'm very worried where the only exit is the local buyer. Spain's a real place. If you have the stomach for Italy, that's fine. Greece is not a relevant market. I think the more interesting markets are Poland and Czech and the more successful convergent states into the EU. But those were already mainstream markets. Before the recession, builders would build in London for a 15% pre-tax margin, which is 10% after tax. So if the costs were 100 million sterling to build something, the profit was 10 million. And in development, a lot of things have to go right. But land prices came down, building prices came down after the Olympics, but because it's a global city with restricted restricted supply, capital values are above their pre-crisis levels. So the margins on these deals are phenomenal. And we've made this is not an advertisement, this is a statement of fact. We are building or have built 1,600 units, which if they're 20,000 delivered, that's 8% of the market. So we're active.
Yeah.
That's a very exciting niche. Everything else is case by case. There's no macro theme that I could see at the moment. The U.S. economy is recovering. Corporates are spending, so in the major cities there is absorption. People are beginning to spend again, so some of the shopping centers are doing well. Until recently, because of the difficulty of getting a mortgage, the strongest sector was rental housing, which is different. The UK does not have the garden apartment concept. 300 units around a golf course or a swimming pool in a Sunbelt city. So the proportion of renters in America is much greater than here in the UK, and that's been a dynamic asset class. So there have been fundamentals that have been driving it. The question now is the pricing ahead of the fundamentals? So will rents grow to justify low cap rates? And you have to look at it city by city, case by case. Liquidity is back in the market. The banks recapitalize themselves. They're lending. And there is a lot of equity, institutional, high net worth, foreign, looking for a home.
Yeah.
So it's getting hot. Again, you can't generalize about the U.S. Beaumont, Texas is very different than Manhattan. And there really are about 6 or 7 cities you would want to own an office building in.
Yeah.
Don't think of it as a get-rich scheme. The money will follow a job well done. Think of yourself as a craftsman. If you're a building surveyor, be the best building surveyor you are. If you're on the finance side, get the best deals possible on the financing. Focus on the job well done. Make sure you're fairly treated, that you're rewarded for your efforts. But the people who strike it rich and the dramatic success stories are statistically very low. So don't make that your aspiration. But it will come. Cream will rise. We hired a fella to be, he didn't have to be, we hired somebody to be a compliance officer because we're FSA. And I just noticed that every time there was a problem in management, he volunteered to deal with it. He solved it. So he's the COO now, from hero to zero. If you're good, you'll be noticed, but focus on the job, not on the dream. That would be and most importantly is know the assets. If you're on the finance side or the tax side, you're not going to walk the real estate. I came up through the banking side. I was not a surveyor, but I think if you can manage a building, understand what tenants want, site selection, from the building out, not from the spreadsheet in, so that you really have a feel. Understand how they operate. The finance will come. That would be my advice. Well, actually, the best deal we ever did as a firm in Europe, the best deal, fair question. Metro, the big German retailer, went into Poland in the 90s because it was its backyard after the fall of communism. And there was no local real estate development community. So they built their own shopping centers to be anchored by their brands. Real, the Electronics Media Markt, and Praktiker, the home DIY. And they assembled a portfolio, let's say it was worth 750 million euros. And then they realized, we own a lot of real estate. We borrowed to do this. We've got to delever. We've got to put the money back into our core business. So we negotiated 4 years sale-leaseback on the entire portfolio. 20-year lease guaranteed by the parent with rental uplifts. We bought it. We closed the day Poland entered the EU. We paid 8.75% yield. We did a refinance because after 2 years, the income grew through indexation. We refinanced, and then we sold a 50% interest for 6%. So we've had a lot of our money out. We still own it. Real has just been replaced with Oshan, so the credit has improved. The footfall will increase, and I think we will have another. We're sitting on substantial gains, but it's the gift that keeps giving because it was the right structure. It's the right real estate with the right refinancing, with the right lease. But Metro, right, they pay us rent, but they collect rent from all the inline tenants. Mm-hmm. And they're collecting more rent than they're paying, but the lease is getting shorter. So that reversion will come to us. So it's just appreciating as time goes by. That was a fun deal.